At the time of upload this time tomorrow, the One Piece card game Season 1 Championship Finals will be taking place live in Paris. So ahead of the tournament and the last chance qualifier that will be taking place on Friday, we're going to take a little look into 5 potential decks to have a look out for. We'll also throw some honorable mentions in there as well. With the way that the One Piece card game format is at the moment, some of these won't be surprises, but I'm hoping there might be some in there just might not have considered. My name is Ben Fitzpatrick. I'm a TCG caster. I just love talking about them. So let's do that right now. But before we get into today's video, if you do enjoy this and you're a fan of the One Piece card game, please do go ahead and drop a like rating on it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like I know that over 95% of you haven't done watching these videos. If you're coming back on the regular, go ahead and subscribe. You might as well. It is completely free. And while you're down there as well, you'll be able to find a link to my link tree where you can see me on all over other platforms, much like X. Now, at the time of this video going live, I will be actually on my way to Paris because I am going to be a part of the casting team that is going to be bringing you all of the action in Paris, France this weekend. I'm really excited for it. I cannot wait to see all the players there in person as well and what decks are going to come out on top. So we can have a little guess, a little summation about what 5 decks we are likely to be seeing quite a lot of. And of course, we have to start with the big blue-purple elephant in the room, blue-purple Luffy. This deck has taken over since its introduction in OP11. 6k base, 3 life leader that on its own leader kit and on its own body can top 5 search before or at the start of your turn's proceedings at that 8 or more Don level. So the strategy with this deck is simple. Ramp aggressively in the early game with cards like Zoro Juro, Mr. 2 Bon Clay, Gear 2, Godthread's Trigger as well. Get to that 8 Don stage and then just constantly start churning out these huge bodies. These are example deck lists as well that I'm using, by the way. Most of these are being taken from the Toronto Regional Championships. So these are just examples. They aren't necessarily the exact 50 that I would necessarily run or that you need to run for these decks. These are just examples and placeholders for illustration's effect. But the strategy is still the same. Ramp aggressively up towards that 8 Don turn. Get to 8 Don and start chaining your big bodies with Sanji being your primary outlet. Obviously, you'll have the knowledge of the top card of the deck after you've drawn for turn, because that top 5 search, the remaining cards can be placed on the top or bottom of the deck. So you take your card from the search, restack the rest to the 4 leave them on top of the deck, drawing next one for turn, and then the third card down of the 5 stack will be what you're looking to flip for Sanji. And what you're looking to flip primarily, 9 cost Lin if you've taken a little bit of damage early and want to heal, or 8 cost Katakuri if you want that huge body on the board that's capable of attacking and reactivating itself to keep that blocker tag relevant. We've also in this list got 2 copies of Dracul Mihawk in here as well. This was the kind of early days combination that we were looking at when 9-cost Sanji was revealed, all the way back ahead of OP06. 9-cost Sanji into 9-cost Mihawk can bottom deck something away with the Mihawk and have 2 9k bodies. But now this is kind of the lesser one that we want to find in that Sanji flip. We're ideally looking for one of the 2 purple Big Mom Pirates cards. In terms of utility that you've got in this deck as well, obviously you've got your 2Ks with the Sanji 2K counter blocker and the Usohachi 2K, which can also rest something 5 cost or less when your opponent, when you have 8 or more Don. You've got the Nami blocker as well, one of the super rares from OP11 to draw 3 and filter 2 cards away as well. This deck running a copy of Charlotte Pudding, maybe to try and help combat in the mirror if your opponent gets a plentiful amount of cards in hand. You can send all of those back into the deck, force them to shuffle, and draw a fresh 5. And then in terms of other utility with events, of course, we're purple and straw hat crew, so we have to be running Gum Gum Giant while it's still around. Gear 2 is utility because not only does it ramp you in the early game, but it also is counterpower for your leader, and it's leader only, remember, not leader or character like most other counter events are. Gear 2 is plus 3k to your leader only. We've got God Thread to be able to pop a 5 cost or less and then ramp an active Don, and then more removal with things like Gum Gum Red Rock to bottom deck something unconditionally, or Gravity Blade Raging Tiger to go after 2 6 or less cost characters on our opponent's side of the board. This deck is just very, very good, very, very fast. If you can see that ramp package early, if you don't see that ramp package early, the deck does stutter and falter a little bit, and you've got a window of opportunity to go into and take victory on there, or at least build enough pressure to that when the Luffy player is getting to that 9 Don range, playing Katakuris and Linlins, maybe a little bit too little too late, as I have found out with my experience on Lim, being able to beat blue-purple Luffys if they can just stutter hitting that ramp on curve. And link to the playlist for all of my One Piece card game videos, which includes my Voyage Diaries series, which is my weekly locals vlog, is in the iCard in the corner of the screen. That Voyage Diary series as well will be getting a special edition action and coverage from European Season 1 Championship Finals. So be sure not to miss out on that. So that's blue-purple Luffy. What about green-purple Luffy? Another deck that was very, very highly heralded when it was getting ready to enter into the format in EBO2. But green-purple Luffy has kind of fallen back a little bit. I think predominantly in reasoning because of how popular blue-purple Luffy is, and that 6k base is just a very, very good place to be. But we can get to 6k base with our own leader effect. Don -2, you can set stuff as active, have your only Straw Hat type crew characters, which of course we have do for the most part, except for Hody Jones, and it gets plus 1,000 power to the end of your opponent's next turn. So we're at that 6,000 power base. Combo that we're looking for with this leader ability is, of course, the Sanji and Pudding. When you've got Don returning to the Don deck, 2 or more to be on your turn, get 1 of those back. But if you have multiple instances of Sanji and Pudding on the board at the same time, they both trigger and you get essentially a refund of your lead ability, which is extra useful and helpful when it comes to one of your closers in the deck, the 6 cost 7k Secret Rare Luffy from EBO2, whose effect relies on returning active Don back to the Don deck, as opposed to rested or active with any regular Don minus ability. You have to have them active to be able to reactivate and swing twice, and then, of course, take a damage when doing so. Rest of the cards in the deck are pretty standard. You've got your 4 Namis to search, your Tony Chopper blockers. They're as defense, but also to help you get level and equal with Don on board. Uso Hachis is 2k. Frankie, for a similar reason, just if you can't quite find Sanji and Pudding in the early stages, Frankie does get you some Don back. Zoro Juro, another searcher on a 6k body this time. The 4 cost 5k Zoro is a pretty cool card, particularly into matchups like Bello Betty, where you want to be attacking into your opponent's board and clearing the way before going into life. Roronoa Zoro allows you to do that. Sanji blockers, again, as 2k counters. Luffy Taro, that can help cheat out one of your Straw Hat Crew type characters, which is most of the cards in the deck here. 1 copy of Hody Jones is in this list. That's a really interesting tech inclusion here. Obviously, you're in green, so it's another potential finisher. And then we run into our events here. 1 copy of the 0 cost purple event, Gum Gum Jet Gatling. 4 copies of your When You're at Sea, You Fight Against Pirates, just to search some more. 4 Gum Gum Giant is standard. Some one-offs of Gamma Knife, Electrical Luna, and Radio Knife here. A little bit more of a kind of a mid-rangey style build of green-purple Luffy. And then, of course, your 4 Merry-Go stages to replace itself in hand. and also boost up the cost of your Straw Hat Crew type characters in one turn. So, Green Purple Luffy, I'm not 100% sure how well it's going to do this weekend. It's definitely going to be up there. And there's a part of me that's kind of hoping to see a resurgence for the deck, if anything, just to combat Blue Purple Luffy. But obviously, Blue Purple is such a dominant force. Is Green Purple going to be able to match that? We will have to wait and see. Next up is one of the decks that has been stealing the format and taking it by storm at the moment, and that is the aforementioned Bello Betty deck, the red-yellow Revolutionary Army style deck that boosts up all Revolutionary Army type characters or characters with trigger by 3,000 power with leader effect when you crash a Rev Army type card in hand. So, your key pieces in this deck are your Bello Betty Searcher, to find some of those major cards. Revolutionary Army HQ, again, more search, more filter. But some of your key characters in this deck are things like the 4-cost Ivankov, to be able to play something out of hand once this is boosted up to 7k. 4-cost Karasu, to reduce your leader's power by minus 1,000 and turn them either to a 4,000 power leader, or if you're facing against something like Blue Purple or Green Purple Luffy, bring them back down to 5k, asterisk if Green Purple has used their leader effect. You've also got the 5-cost Ivankov here, which doesn't rely on having its power modified in any way. It's just a simple on-play, search top 3, grab a Rev Army type character with 5,000 power or less, and play it into the character area. We've also got, for some utility, we've got our Karasu blocker. That could be triggered out of life. Got things like Raise Max and Koala for a little bit of power reduction to help facilitate the on-play of the Bartholomew Kuma to KO some characters with 2,000 power or less. We have Zeus that's been included as a 2k counter from OP11, but also is a way to KO characters on your opponent's side of the board. Take 1 damage for yourself and then KO a 5-cost or less. Can be especially helpful if your opponent is trying to starve your life, stop you from being able to freely take that damage. If they are going after the character area first and foremost, like they should do, Zeus just allows you that little bit of extra versatility to take 1 card on the life hand. You got Inazuma as a little bit of a surprise package. If you have a character with 7,000 power or more other than Inazuma, again, important to remember the wording here, this character gains Rush. The 5-cost Promo Sabo, which has been a really cool inclusion into Modern Betty list. 5-cost 5k body, activate main once per turn. Again, is another instance of you being able to take damage for yourself in case your opponent's trying to starve you. It gets a plus 1,000 powers boost for the turn before you activate your leader ability. So already you're meeting that 6k level to potentially go into the Blue-Purple Luffy deck. That's basically all of the characters in the deck. You've also got the blocker Koala. That can be a little bit of help as well. Interestingly, in this list, we've got 2 copies of Honesty Impact. Activate main, give one of your opponent's characters minus 4,000 power during the turn, and then pop a 6k or less on your opponent's board, and then a trigger to deal with a 6k or less as well. Very, very interesting. Of course, not searchable because it's Navy/Sword type. My only assumption for this is that we're primarily playing this to activate the trigger. Because I feel like in a Bello Betty deck, you're going to have very little time and very little resources still around to pay the 6 for it, playing it out of hand. There might be situations where it is correct to do so. Absolutely, don't get me wrong. And when you're pairing it with the power reduction that you've got with things like Raise Max and Koala, you know, you've got a bit of synergy there with that. But to me, this feels like this would be best activated and best looked for out of the trigger. I've noticed as well that this deck is only running 2 copies of the 2k counter Zeus. So if it were me, potentially if I was taking Bello Betty to the Paris Championship Finals this weekend, I'd probably go with the 4 Zeus and not consider Honesty Impact at all. If anything, just for the extra 2k counter levels, because here in this deck, You've got, what, 10 2Ks? Because this 5-cost Sabo, crazily, is also a 2K counter. So you've got 10 2Ks with the Koala, the Sabo, and the Zeus's. And you're probably wanting to play the Sabo, or at least one of them, down onto the board throughout the course of the game. And Zeus being a utility piece. So I'd probably bump that up to a full copies of 4, have the 12 2Ks, and have removal that way. Yes, it's slightly at odds with your Raise Max and Koala stuff, but you've got Bartholomew Kuma there to be able to be your KO outlet for your Raise Max and Koala power reduction. Next up, we've got Buggy. And Buggy is a deck that is in a little bit of a weird spot at the moment, in all honesty. The end of the EBO2 format and into the start of OP11, when all the starter decks came out, Buggy was all the rage. Buggy was all the hype. Loads of players were on this. I know Roranora TCG, a very well-known player and influence in the European community in particular, is very, very fond of the Buggy deck at the moment and has piloted it very, very well throughout the past couple of offline regionals. But it's not quite got there at the moment. Like, it's not had the full results, unlike something that Bello Betty has. Buggy, if you are unfamiliar, is a character and is a leader that can bring out cross-skilled characters turns earlier than you ordinarily looking for. So with your leader effect, you pay 5, crash 1 from hand, and play out a cross-skilled type character from your hand on board. And the general combo that you're looking for with this leader Buggy is to bring out the 8-cost Croc and Mihawk, one of the new super rare additions from the Buggy starter deck, number 25. Because you can draw 2, trash 1, filter, and then you get to play a 4-cost or less cross-skill type character from your hands. You can play things like Alvida, Kabaji, Buggy, and Moji down onto board. That's kind of your general combo that you're looking for. But you do have other options and other choices that are matchup dependent as well. Obviously, we've got the Dracula Mihawks still in the deck. This list is still running 7-cost Crocodiles, although I do know that there are some Buggy lists that have either running just 1 copy of this or have cut it entirely. You've got the 4-cost Buggy that we mentioned earlier, which is another way to bring some of these higher-cost characters out a couple of turns earlier than you would do. You've got the 10-cost Buggy, which can bottom deck something on your opponent's side of the board. Then if you don't have 5 characters with 5 cost or more, this goes away. However, this does get negated if you're playing up against Marshall D. Teach. And one of the reasons why Marshall D. Teach has kind of dropped off in representation at the moment, because a couple of them are living in fear of turning off the on-plays and then this dropping down to 5, and you've got a 12k body to deal with before you can even get your 10-cost blocker Teach out onto the board. So we've got a lot of kind of consistency, mid-rangey combo aggro style. This deck does a lot, really. And it can do even more with the recent inclusion of Sables into the deck. Sables is a card that was all the way back from Starter Deck 3 and allows you to bounce a 7-cost or less character back to the owner's hand. It does the same thing out of life as well in Trigger. Couple of differences as well with some other lists that I've seen. This one in particular is only running 1 copy of the Love Love Mellow and 3 copies of Sanji's Pilaf. I've seen a lot of Buggy lists that have removed Pilaf entirely and maybe a little bit more heavy on the Mellow count. So keep an eye on that one if you're looking to either play the deck yourself or watch the broadcast and watch the action this weekend. There may be a couple of differences here. I also mentioned about cards that are maybe a little bit more matchup dependent. 7-cost promo Buggy is one of those cards. It's a 7-cost 8k, which cannot attack. Ordinarily, sounds terrible. But if your leader is Buggy, all characters with a cost of 3 or 4 cannot attack. This is primarily going to be targeting Betty, because pretty much all of the characters in here are 3 or 4 costs. There are some exceptions, of course, 5 cost of Vankov and Sabo, but this 7-cost Buggy really helps you get an edge in the Bello Betty matchup. And on play, you can bring another cross-skill type character with you with a cost of 6 or less. So often it will be Mihawk, but sometimes it might be something like Kabaji or the Alvida to get some more filter, draw into that 8-cost Crocker Mihawk if you haven't found it already. So Buggy is a really, really interesting shout and a really interesting call for the Championship Finals in Paris this weekend. Do I think it's going to win the event? Probably not. Do I think it's going to do well at the event? Probably. I could see this getting into Top Cut pretty easily. How far it goes into Top Cut, I'm not 100% sure. That's probably not a controversial take. I'd love to see Buggy get into the grand final. I think that would be fantastic. It's a really, really cheap deck to build as well. Buy 2 of the starter deck 25s, and these super rares are like 10, 20 pence each, 50 cents, depending on wherever you're living in the world. These are really, really cheap, so it's a really, really nice, easy deck to make. Pilaf might be the only thing that's like slightly expensive in this deck at maybe £1, or at least they were when I built my Nami deck. That was a long time ago. So this has probably dropped even further, in all honesty. But really, really good deck, really, really fun deck. And one I actually just even need to try and even need to play personally. I've not managed to get a hold of Starter Deck 25 yet to give this deck a go. But I want to. You never know. One Piece Card Game Voyage Diaries after Paris Finals, we might be clowning things up here. We might also be pivoting to something a little bit slower, and a card and a leader, funnily enough, that was the most recent alt art leader purchase that I have made for the One Piece card game, and a deck that I think is going to splash back in a big, big way, has just been waiting for its time to do so, is Paris Finals, the time for Bonnie to be well and truly back. She's already in a pretty interesting state, thanks to the new starter decks giving her a couple of extra 2Ks in the form of Basil Hawkins. X-Drake isn't in here, but I know people are experimenting and playing with X-Drake as well. A new blocker in the form of Capone Gang Beige as well. But Jewelry Bonnie is your traditional green control deck. It's wanting to create tempo, create advantage, use its leader ability, stop one of your opponents getting an attack off with a character by resting them, and you've got ways to either keep them rested with things like the carrot, and or to facilitate that leader effect even being around. A Rouge blocker coming back into the deck as an end of your turn ability to reactivate one of your Don means that this is more often what you're playing going second on turn 2. Turn 1, you're probably going Jewelry Bonnie Search. Turn 2, a Rouge, getting the active Don ready for Bonnie, and then getting into Cavendish on turn 3, which on play and when attacking, re-stands 2 of your Don if you have a Supernova type leader and no other Cavendish characters. It's a fantastic card in green. And then your closers in the deck, obviously we're in green, so we've got 4 copies of Hody Jones. We've got 3 copies of Eustace Captain Kidd here to help try and prolong the game even further, which is paired with Don Quixote Rosanante as the 2-cost or lower blocker that can be joined with the Activate main on Captain Kidd. Same with Capone Gang Beige. We've got Tashigi to protect some of those green characters from effect removal. 9-cost Shanks to just be able to come down, KO something, and be an 11k body. And of course, we've got things like Rowan or Zorro as well that are still floating around in some Bonnie lists to attack 3 times for 9k or more, depending on how much Don you attach. Don't forget as well that there are other super rares that we have now had opened up to us again because of the Rouge in particular being brought back in deck. Predominantly before, you'd have a Rouge as your, leader effect facilitator, and you'd be chaining these 10 drops like 10-cost Don Quixote do Flamingo to freeze down either 2 characters and the leader, or 3 characters. Or you've now also got Law and Beppo, one of the new super rares from the Jewelry Bonnie starter deck, which is able to stun something down, or at least make it so that it can't reactivate in the refresh phase, and potentially make your leader a 7k base for your opponent's next turn. It is important to remember, though, that with Blore and Beppo, if you have a way to restand a character during your turn, like Roran or Azora, for example, it gets through the Lore and Beppo effect, the Lore and Beppo freeze, because that only happens during the refresh phase. So cards like that, or the Mono Black Snake Man Luffy, that you can restand by putting 7 cards back into the deck from your trash, that can reactivate and get around the Lore and Beppo effect. The same can be said as well with the Carrot, because this is only during your next refresh phase that the card gets stunned down for. But Jewelry Bonnie is a really, really good deck. The only issue with it is that it takes a little bit of time to be able to establish that hard control lock. And in this format at the moment, you don't necessarily have that time, especially when you're targeting, for example, Blue-Purple Luffy. If they get their quick start, even if they find sort of just one piece of ramp in the early game, you are already really, really far behind if you are the Bonnie player here. There will obviously be ways that you can win in that matchup, but I think Bonnie is just kind of, you know, you've got to be a very, very smart mind to get around playing Jewelry Bonnie, and especially into the format that it is right now. So, those are 5 of the decks that I would primarily be looking and watching out for across the 3 days of action this weekend at the Paris Championship Finals for the One Piece card game. Some other honorable mentions potentially here now at this point. Green-Yellow Lore has seen a lot of love and a lot of representation as of late. Is it going to be able to do enough to finally get itself a European Finals or European event win? I'm not 100% sure. Again, it's more of a combo-style deck that can be very, very fragile if you use the leader effect wrong, or if you mistime an activation of something. It can be punished very, very heavily because it manipulates your life quite a lot. Other things, Mono Purple Luffy potentially could be an interesting call. I'm not 100% sure if I'm convinced with that one, though. I'll never fully write out Marshall D. Teach. Stop your opponent from playing half of their strategy by deactivating on plays. And I know there are always a very, very, very committed members of the community that are working hard on trying to get Teach to that winning status and level. Will it reach it in the championship finals? Have to tune in to find out the end. So that means it's now over to you. What do you think about these potential decks to watch out for? Are there any decks that I haven't mentioned at all? And of course, leave your predictions down in the comments for what you think is going to win in Paris this weekend. I'll save my predictions for the actual broadcast this weekend. It's going to be one that you are not going to want to miss out on. Trust me on that. So that's going to end today's video then. If you have enjoyed it, please go ahead and drop a like rating on it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, with notifications turned on as well. Until the next time, until we see you in the next video, thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Goodbye for now.